The country of Mexico is under a lot of heat right now from the international community, more so from the community who is in favor of Ukraine over Russia in this entirety of the Ukraine war conflict. Now, what Mexico did, many people question. They allowed for Russian troops to march in Mexico's parade of independence. Now, the reason why a lot of people are upset about this is because at the same time, Mexico has been critical to Russia, yet Mexico has not necessarily condemned Russia or Ukraine. They're just trying to stay in the middle. The only difference is this. A lot of actions have implications here. Like they're trying to be the Switzerland of the world, trying to be mutual, trying to be peaceful. The only difference is, imagine if Switzerland allowed for the Germans to march in their parade of independence. Although Switzerland will boast, well, we are very peaceful. Is that true if you're allowing the Germans to march in your country? That shows a little bit of favoritism, and that shows a lot of distrust from the Mexicans. Now, of course, Ukraine is very pissed off about this because Ukraine, again, was under the impression that Mexico and Ukraine, we are allies, we are partners. I thought you condemned the Russians. I thought you were not for this war. In fact, the interesting thing about Mexico, they were one of the parties who tried to bring the two countries to peace. But again, if you do allow for Russian troops to march in your parade, it does set a weird example for other countries who are trying to stay peaceful. In my opinion, I think this was a really bad move on Mexico's part, but let's actually dig into the story and see what Mexico has to say. What is their defense for allowing Russia to march in their parade? All right, now we're going over to Mexico. This story is kind of wild, and I think the international community is a little shocked. This is a news story that flew under the radar a little bit, but I'm not surprised because Mexico does what Mexico wants, and they can do whatever they want, but it definitely doesn't set a great example for others. So for those of you who are not aware, Mexico and Russia are friends. They're partners. Mexico borders the United States, for those of you who don't know. Mexico says they want to be friends with everyone. Mexico also found aliens a week ago from the time of this live stream. So the Mexico president defends Russian participation in a military parade. And you guys let me know in the comments here, what do you think about that? It's a very odd story. The Mexican president, Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, long name, on Monday defended the presence of Russian military unit in a weekend parade marking Mexico's Independence Day. I don't know what the Russians have to do with Mexico's independence. Following sharp criticism in his country had given a platform to forces that invaded Ukraine. Somebody said China was also there. Wow. Ukraine's ambassador to Mexico, opposition politicians, and critical media blasted the decision to allow a Russian unit to participate on Saturday, but Lopez Obrador said Mexico had allowed any country to join in. That would be the most wild parade. Any country can join Mexico. Honestly, this is a little dangerous because, I mean, that's a military strategy. You can send any military you want into Mexico because we're here for the parade. Okay. Imagine Ukraine being like, okay, yeah, we're here for the parade, marching alongside Russian forces, right? We have relations with all countries in the world, and we invite everyone. Lopez Obrador said at regular government press conference after nothing that the presence of the Russian unit had sparked a scandal. Lopez Obrador, a leftist, has sought to keep Mexico neutral in the war between Russia and Ukraine, at one point proposing peace talks, which is a good thing. It's good to have peace talks. But it's definitely a little bit of an instigative thing considering a lot of Mexico's biggest partners are not partners with Russia. Nonetheless, his government has backed some major UN resolutions criticizing Russia's role in the conflict. Again, very odd relationship here. Condemning the Russians, but allowing the Russians to march in your independence parade. Ukraine's ambassador to Mexico, Okansa Dromariska, sorry if I said that wrong, sir, said on X, Twitter, no one likes this name, X. We all call it Twitter. That the parade had been sullied by the participation of Russian unit, which she said was stained with blood. How coherent is Mr. Lopez Obrador with your policy of neutrality and condemnation of aggression against my country? She wrote on Twitter. Russia's embassy in Mexico celebrated the 154th Regiment's participation in the event. Now, we also have an interesting story to follow this, where the same time, I'm going to skip this part. Can't show that. Russia is suing at the UN and is asking the UN court to stop this whole conflict. The reason why this is totally ironic that Russia is going to court is that Vladimir Putin is also supposed to be going to court. He's been charged with crimes against humanity. The smuggling of children, invading a sovereign nation.
Using the UN's 1948 Genocide Treaty.
Ukraine insists no genocide has occurred. That alone should be enough to reject the case, because, according to the court's jurisprudence, if there was no genocide, there cannot be a violation of the Genocide Convention.
So Russia's playing semantics and playing into the whole, well, it says here, though, we can't be here if there wasn't something bad happening, so there must be something bad happening. Again, I think this is a stupid move on Russia. I don't agree with anything that they're doing, but it's very, ironic that they're in a court when Putin himself won't even go to court.
The hearings at the International Court of Justice, also known as the World Court, are set to run until September 27th and will not address the merits of the case. Instead, it will focus on legal arguments about jurisdiction. The court has no way to enforce its decision, and Russia's government has previously ignored court orders to stop its military.
Exactly. And to the point of this video, these international courts, they're good to have some sort of standard to like abide by. So if there's a standard that says, you know, we should not attack regular populations, civilian populations, that's good. And if a country does that, we now have a legal process to implement. The only issue is with these courts, you can't do anything about it, especially with someone like Russia. Russia can do whatever they want because they're still in conflict. Who's going to go into Russia and get Putin? The only person who came close to that was the whole Wagner mutiny. So again, these courts are just a way, they're like these clown shows. They're these kangaroo courts where really at the end of the day, that's why the victors are the true winners of the war, because now they can impose a court process, just like what happened in World War II when you had all these trials against the Germans, etc. None of those trials would have happened if the Germans won.
Actions. Experts say a ruling in Kyiv's favor would not stop the war, but could impact future reparation payments.
Okay, and if you guys didn't know about this story, this happened about in March. The situation in Ukraine. ICC judge issues arrest warrants against Vladimir Putin. And of course, these warrants mean nothing because you have to go and get Putin or he has to turn himself in. Now, Putin had avoided going to like South Africa to attend conferences. All the conferences that Putin has with these African summits and other summits, they all happen within Russia. Russia didn't go to North Korea. North Korea went to Russia. China goes to Russia. They don't go to China. To avoid this, because Putin knows he's a wanted man. But again, these rulings cannot be enforced unless Russia loses or Putin is detained. I'm not trying to minimize or say that these are not important. They are important because you do need a set of rules and you do need a set of moral standards here, especially when it comes to the rules of war, which is a whole nother topic for a whole nother time because that's a confusing one. Yeah. Putin pretty much was being accused there's proof that they were smuggling children out of Ukraine into Russia. There's been accounts of these Ukrainian kids who finally come back to their parents and they said we were at a summer camp. They took us back. We've been gone for months and the Russians were just trying to have us adopted. There's plenty of evidence to look into it. That's why the ICC even put the warrants out there. And so, again, the main point of this is to show you that none of this matters, though, because Russia is not going to even acknowledge this happened. Russia's not going to be following any of this. And Russia going to the UN and complaining about Ukraine is also another kangaroo court and a clown show. So, yeah. Something else that's quite surprising and no one else is really talking about with this whole Mexico parade is that Mexico also allowed for Chinese troops to march in their nation. Now, of course, Russia and China would love to bring their militaries into a country that borders the United States. As much as China and Russia want to say, well, we are here to support Mexico, let's be honest, this is not a show of aggression of force, but it's a show of opportunity where these militaries are partners with countries who border the United States. Now, without a doubt, understand this, Russia does border the United States technically up in Alaska. China has military bases down in Cuba. But nonetheless, Mexico and the United States have had a lot of friction within the last several years, especially with the whole border disputes and the mission going down in Texas. It's been a massive political talking point. But nonetheless, Mexico and the United States have always been trying to work together in favor of peace. Never was there ever mentions of China and Russia coming into the circle and them getting involved with any of this. So again, we also have China marching in on this parade, and this is not great for the United States. This was really not talked about a lot, but the U.S. military and the United States is eyeing this as in, why would you allow people that we're not friends with? I thought we were friends. Again, it looks like Mexico is trying to show that they want to be peaceful with everyone, but also keep their door open for opportunity in case things don't work out with the United States. No issue. China is willing to work with literally any single nation in the world. They work with Somalia. They work with a lot of different African countries that can be a little questionable in their actions. Nonetheless, China will work with anyone. Russia's a little more selective, but would love to work with Mexico, would love to have troops in Mexico. This is not great for the United States. This is not great for Mexico. Nonetheless, this is what Mexico is doing. All of this to make their parade a little bit better.